The vastness of space was silent, cold, and endless. But tonight, a faint, desperate signal echoed through the void. On Luna Base, the primary human outpost on the moon, an emergency alert flashed on the control panels. The Terran Space Command, TSC, detected a distress call. Weak, almost lost in static, but unmistakably alien. Commander Jack Carter, Earth's best pilot, was lounging in the break room, sipping his cold coffee when his communicator beeped. "Commander Carter, we've received a distress signal from deep space, unknown origin, requesting immediate analysis," the control officer reported. Jack sat up straight, his instincts kicking in. Most distress calls were ignored by Earth's high command. Protocol stated that humanity shouldn't interfere with alien affairs unless absolutely necessary. But something about this signal felt urgent. "Patch it through to my console," he ordered. The screen flickered, revealing a heavily corrupted transmission. A deep, static-filled voice spoke in broken English. "Crew, danger, need help. SOS, ship failing." Then, silence. Jack frowned. He was no diplomat, but he wasn't about to sit around while someone was dying out there. He knew what Central Command would say. "Ignore it. Not our problem." But that wasn't Jack's style. He jumped to his feet, heart pounding. If no one else was going to help, he would. Departure. Minutes later, Jack was in the hangar, prepping his ship, the Falcon 9, a sleek, modified fighter with speed and agility unmatched by anything in human space. His best friend and co-pilot, Riley, rushed over. "Jack, are you crazy? Command won't approve this." Jack smirked as he climbed into the cockpit. "Good thing I'm not asking for approval." Riley sighed. "What if it's a trap?" Jack flicked switches, running pre-flight checks. "Then I'll find out the hard way. But I won't sit here while someone's calling for help." The engines roared to life. The Falcon 9 lifted off, shooting out of the hangar like a comet. Jack was heading into the unknown. Alone. Arrival at the coordinates. Hours later, Jack reached the location where the signal originated. The sight that greeted him made his stomach drop. A massive alien ship, larger than any human vessel, floated helplessly near a collapsing star. Its hull was cracked, debris drifting around it like shattered glass. The ship's energy signature was fading fast. It wouldn't survive much longer. Jack opened comms. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Jack Carter of Terran Space Command. Do you copy?" Static. Then, a weak voice. "Human. Help. Crew trapped." Jack tightened his grip on the controls. This wasn't just a distress call. It was a race against time. And Jack Carter was ready. The immense alien vessel loomed ahead, its dark, twisted shape barely holding together as it drifted ever closer to the collapsing star. The star's gravity was pulling everything in. Slowly, relentlessly. Time was running out. Jack Carter's heart raced, but his face remained calm. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. This was not just about saving the ship. This was about saving lives. "Unknown vessel, do you copy?" Jack called out again, his voice steady despite the rising tension. For a moment, there was nothing but crackling static. The silence was suffocating. Jack checked his readings. Life support was failing, oxygen levels were dangerously low, and the ship was barely holding onto its power. Then, a voice, weak but clear, came through the static. "Human, thank you for answering. We need help. Life support failing. Crew injured. Please, assist." It was a female voice, trembling with fear and exhaustion. Jack immediately opened his comms again. "I'm coming aboard. Hold tight." He looked around, scanning the ship's hull, trying to find a way in. The alien ship was massive, almost like a floating city in space. He activated the boarding clamps on the Falcon 9, locking his fighter to the ship's outer hull. With a swift, practiced motion, Jack sealed his helmet and grabbed his weapons. Boarding the alien ship, The outside of the vessel was like nothing Jack had ever seen, a twisted blend of organic and metal, with sleek, sharp edges that seemed to pulse with energy. His boots echoed loudly as he stepped onto the darkened hull. Jack moved quickly, finding a hatch that led inside. He used a small cutting tool to slice through the metal. As the hatch doors slid open, a wave of heat and smoke hit him. Inside, the air was thick with tension and fear. The alien ship was in chaos. Wounded crew members lay scattered along the corridors, some unconscious, others groaning in pain. The lights flickered, and alarms blared in the distance. Jack immediately moved to help. He spotted a tall alien officer, lying against a wall, his chest armor cracked and blood seeping from his wounds. Jack knelt down beside him. "Are you all right?" Jack asked, his voice sharp but calm. The officer's eyes blinked open, his alien features twisted in pain. He gasped for breath, his voice weak but defiant. "We are fine, but the ship, it will not survive." Before Jack could respond, a harsh voice shouted down the hall, "Get away from him, human." Jack turned to see a Valkyrie soldier standing at the end of the corridor, gun raised. The soldier's red skin and black armor made him look terrifying. Jack didn't flinch, but he could feel the tension building. "Stand down, soldier. I'm here to help," Jack said, his voice firm but non-threatening. The soldier hesitated, but his gaze flickered to the officer Jack was tending to. The officer nodded weakly, signaling for the soldier to lower his weapon. "He saved my life. We need his help," the officer whispered. The soldier grunted, lowering his gun. Jack could feel the eyes of the entire crew on him. Suspicion, fear, and curiosity all mixed together. Jack stood up, trying to stay focused. "We don't have time for this. We need to stabilize the life support systems first. If we don't, you'll all be dead before we even reach the escape pods." The officer gave him a sharp look, but he said nothing. The tension was palpable. The crew was divided, unsure of what to make of this human who had just appeared in their darkest hour. Jack took a deep breath, pushing aside the uncertainty. He wasn't about to back down now. To be continued. This part continues the growing suspense, with Jack starting to gain the Valkyrie crew's trust while still facing challenges. The next part can ramp up the action as they race to save the ship. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. Jack stood in the heart of the alien ship, the air thick with smoke and tension. His mind raced. The crew was scattered, injured, and the Valkyrie ship was a ticking time bomb. Life support was failing, and the gravity well from the nearby dying star was pulling them in. The situation was dire, but Jack knew what had to be done. The Valkyrie officer, now on his feet, was staring at the damage. Commander Rylus was tall and imposing, with sharp features, his crimson skin gleaming under the flickering lights. Despite the obvious injuries, he still held himself with pride. Jack could tell the Valkyrie had little trust for humans, but there was something in Rylus's eyes, a recognition of competence, perhaps. "You said you could help." Rylus finally spoke, his voice strained. "We need a way to stabilize life support. The engine, it's a wreck. You have minutes before we lose everything." Jack nodded. "I've dealt with worse. Lead me to the control room." They rushed through the narrow, dark hallways of the ship. Jack's boots clanked against the metal floors, and the sounds of screaming alarms and failing machinery echoed through the corridors. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, as though the ship itself were alive and dying. As they reached the control room, Jack quickly assessed the situation. Panels were blinking red, the air thick with static. He could feel the heat rising, the pressure mounting. His hands moved quickly over the controls, working with the unfamiliar alien technology. "Do you know how to operate this?" Rylus asked skeptically, eyeing Jack's every move. "I know enough," Jack replied, his voice calm despite the mounting chaos. "But I'll need some help. I can get the power back on, but I'll need you to override the system to reset the cooling unit." Rylus hesitated, then nodded. "We will help, but make it fast. Racing the clock. Jack dove into the alien systems, his fingers dancing over the strange, glowing panels. The technology was advanced, yes, but human ingenuity had always found a way. Jack had always been good at thinking on his feet. He bypassed a couple of systems, ignoring the flashing red warning signs. He knew what he had to do. Life support, the cooling system, and propulsion. If they didn't get at least one of them functioning, the ship would burn up long before it reached any safe distance from the star. The control room was sweltering now. Sweat beaded on Jack's forehead as he concentrated, his fingers moving faster. Meanwhile, Rylus stood beside him, his eyes flicking nervously to the readouts. "The star is pulling us in faster than we expected," he said, his voice low. "We have only a few minutes before we lose control entirely." Jack didn't respond. He didn't need to. Focus. Stay focused. With a final, forceful swipe across the console, Jack reactivated the primary power grid. The ship shuddered, and the lights flickered back on. A brief moment of relief, but it was only temporary. The ship's core was still unstable, and they were still hurtling toward the star. "Done," Jack said, breathing heavily. "Life support is back online, but the engine is still down. We need to fix that next, or we're not going anywhere." Rylus looked at him, eyes narrowed. "You really think you can fix it? The engine core is compromised beyond our ability to repair it." Jack turned toward him, his eyes burning with determination. "Watch me." The air in the control room was thick with tension. The Valkyrie ship groaned under the stress of the dying star's gravity. Jack Carter had just managed to stabilize the life support system, but the ship wasn't out of danger yet. In fact, the most critical problem remained. The engine core was failing, and without a functional engine, they were doomed to be pulled into the star's fiery embrace. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow. The moment of relief after restarting life support was short-lived. The engine core was a different beast altogether, and Jack could feel the growing sense of urgency. Commander Rylus stepped closer, his eyes scanning the control panels. "I told you," he said with a mix of frustration and concern. "It's beyond repair. The engine core is compromised. We'll be sucked into the star, no matter what we do." Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he bent down to the console, his mind racing. He had been in tough situations before, but this was different. The stakes weren't just about him. Lives were on the line. "We don't have time to argue," Jack finally said, standing up straight. His voice was calm but filled with determination. "I can fix it. I'll just need you to trust me." Rylus eyed him for a long moment, disbelief in his gaze. The Valkyrie were known for their pride, their disdain for outsiders, and their warrior mentality. Jack was a human, a species they barely considered worthy of notice. And now, this human was suggesting he could fix their broken, powerful ship. But the moment of hesitation passed quickly. Rylus nodded slowly. "Do what you must," he said, his voice tight. "But make it fast." Jack's plan. Jack's mind worked fast as he scanned the engine's data. Heat levels were rising. The core was unstable, and the ship was dangerously close to the star. They had only a few minutes before they would be pulled into the star's deadly pull. Jack grabbed a nearby diagnostic tool, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. The alien ship's systems were unfamiliar to him, but there were always patterns to follow. Every machine had a weak point. Jack knew how to find it. The problem was the coolant flow. The engines were overheating, and the damaged core was threatening to explode. The Valkyrie ship's advanced technology was not something a human could easily understand. But Jack wasn't just any pilot. He was Earth's best, and if he could fly the fastest ships in the galaxy, he could fix this. "I need your engineers to help me," Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. He didn't wait for a response, but ran toward a nearby corridor where the Valkyrie crew had set up temporary repair stations. The gamble. Jack found the engineers working frantically, their alien hands pressing buttons, adjusting switches, But none of it was enough. The ship was still on a direct path toward the star. Jack barked out instructions, directing them to rewire some of the damaged cooling systems to stabilize the core temperature. "This is it," Jack muttered under his breath as he connected the final wire. "If this doesn't work, we're done." He sealed the final circuit, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire ship jolted. Loud creaks echoed through the walls as the energy surged. "We're losing it," someone shouted. But Jack held his breath. He wasn't giving up. With a final push of a button, the engine core hummed back to life. The ship shuddered, the lights flickered, and then nothing. For a long, terrifying moment, it seemed like they were still doomed. But then, a software filled the room. The engines had started, and with it, hope. "It worked," Jack whispered, his voice filled with relief. Jack Carter let out a relieved breath as the Valkyrie ship's engines hummed to life once again. The faint whir of the engines was a sound that gave him hope. The ship had a chance now. A real chance. The deadly star, which had once been pulling them in, was now far behind. But that didn't mean they were safe. "We're clear of the gravity well," Jack said, looking at the controls with a satisfied smirk. "We're good for now. But we need to get back to the Valkyrie home system. Fast." Rylus stood behind him, his eyes still narrow, though there was a hint of respect in them now. "You've done the impossible, human. But this isn't over." Jack turned to face the commander. "What do you mean?" "The engines are fixed. Life support is back online. We should be fine for a while." Rylus's expression darkened. Asterisk, you've saved us for now. But the Zargoth pirates, they're here." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Pirates? I thought they only raided unarmed ships." "The Zargoth are more than pirates," Rylus replied, his voice cold. "They're scavengers. They'll take anything they can, and they'll kill anyone who stands in their way. They've been tracking us since we entered this sector." The pirate attack. Before Jack could respond, the ship suddenly lurched. A low, vibrating hum filled the room as shuddering blasts hit the hull from outside. "They found us," Rylus muttered, eyes wide with alarm. "Prepare for boarders." Jack barely had time to strap into the nearest seat when the ship was rocked by another blast. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as the entire vessel was hit by a wave of intense energy. The Zargoth pirates had arrived. Through the damaged viewports, Jack saw the shape of an enemy ship. It was sleek, dark, and menacing, perfect for ambushing vulnerable ships like theirs. It hovered ominously, its boarding pods already launching toward the Valkyrie ship. "Brace for impact," Rylus ordered, his voice filled with authority. Jack's instincts kicked in. The Valkyrie were used to fighting in space, but they weren't prepared for a full-scale pirate invasion. He had to act fast. He slammed a button on his console and opened a direct line to the Valkyrie security force. "I've got a fighter," Jack said. "I can help hold them off, but I need to get to the hangar." Rylus hesitated for a split second before nodding. "Go. We'll hold the line here." Boarding battle. The next few minutes felt like a blur as Jack raced through the ship's corridors, his boots pounding against the metal floor. The ship was in chaos. Valkyrie soldiers were moving quickly to secure vulnerable points, but they were outnumbered. The Zargoth pirates had advanced technology and brutal tactics on their side. Jack finally reached the hangar and jumped into his Falcon 9 fighter. The engines roared to life as he quickly launched into space, engaging his ship's defensive systems. From his cockpit, he could see the pirates boarding the Valkyrie ship. They were moving swiftly, weapons drawn, their alien forms menacing. Jack gritted his teeth and fired up his fighter's weapon systems, locking onto the enemy's boarding pods. He fired off a few well-aimed blasts, destroying the pods before they could make it to the ship's hull. But the Zargoth weren't done yet. Another wave of boarders dropped from the pirate ship, this time cloaked, harder to see, but not impossible to track. Jack quickly activated his fighter's advanced targeting system. "Come on," "Come on," Jack muttered under his breath, watching as the cloaked enemies moved closer to the Valkyrie ship. He couldn't let them board, not while the crew was still vulnerable. With a final, determined push, Jack fired off several high-powered shots, hitting the pirates' pods just in time. They exploded in a brilliant flash, sending debris scattering in all directions. The Zargoth pirates were relentless. Jack could feel the tension in the air as he darted through space, weaving between the Valkyrie ship and the pirate vessel. The Zargoth ships were designed for one thing: stealth and destruction. Their boarders had already breached the Valkyrie ship's hull in several places, and it was up to Jack to stop them before they could overwhelm the crew. His Falcon 9 fighter zoomed through space, its engines roaring, but the enemy was quick to adapt. Zargoth ships were built for precision, and their cloaking technology made it harder to track them. Jack's heart raced, but his mind stayed focused. Come on," Jack muttered to himself, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls. He switched to manual targeting mode. His sharp eyes scanned the dark expanse around him. The pirate ship's stealth made it almost impossible to see, but Jack wasn't going to let that stop him. Suddenly, there was a flash of movement. A Zargoth boarding pod streaked across his radar. Jack's hands moved without hesitation. He locked onto the pod and fired, the laser blast hitting its target before the pirates had time to react. The pod exploded, sending debris scattering through space. But that wasn't enough. The Zargoth were coming in waves, and the pirates weren't giving up easily. A sudden turn. Jack noticed the Zargoth warship moving closer to the Valkyrie vessel, its weapons preparing for another blazing assault. The Valkyrie ship's shields were weakening, and Jack knew they couldn't last much longer. He had to stop the pirates before they boarded again. As his fighter dove closer to the enemy ship, Jack spotted another boarding pod being deployed. He zoomed in, his targeting system locking onto the pod. The Zargoth pirates had no idea he was closing in. Jack fired a precision shot just in time. The pod was hit mid-flight, shattering into pieces before it could reach the Valkyrie ship. The pirates on the ship were getting frustrated, but Jack knew this was only the beginning. The Valkyrie ship's last stand. Inside the Valkyrie ship, the crew was in the middle of an all-out battle. The Zargoth pirates had breached the main hull, and the Valkyrie soldiers were fighting fiercely to hold their ground. Commander Rylus led his men with grit, but even they knew they were outnumbered. The pirates were vicious, and they had no intention of leaving empty-handed. Rylus glanced up as a blast rocked the ship. Jack's fighter was still out there, keeping the pirates at bay. "We can't hold out much longer," Rylus muttered, his expression dark. "We need more time," one of the Valkyrie engineers shouted, working desperately on a damaged control panel. Jack's voice crackled through their comm system, filled with urgency. "I'm holding them off, but we need to finish what we started. The pirates won't back down. We need to make a stand." Rylus took a deep breath and looked around at his soldiers. "Hold the line, all of you. We will not let them take this ship." The pirates had managed to break through in several areas, but the Valkyrie warriors fought fiercely. The battle in the hull was brutal, with blasts echoing off the walls and the sound of weapons clashing. But Jack had done his part. He was keeping the Zargoth at bay from the outside. A turn in the fight. Just as things seemed to be spiraling out of control, a sudden shift happened. The Valkyrie's defensive turrets came to life, their systems restored thanks to the efforts of the engineering team. The guns fired, taking down pirate boarding pods in midair. Jack's quick thinking had bought them enough time to recharge the defense systems. "Nice work, human," Rylus's voice crackled through the comms. "But don't let up now. We still need to finish this." Jack's fighter zipped through space, dodging enemy fire and returning it in kind. The pirate's ship was now taking heavy damage from the combined efforts of Jack and the Valkyrie defense systems. The Zargoth were in retreat, but not without a final attempt at boarding the Valkyrie vessel. As the last of the pirate pods attempted to latch onto the hull, Jack unleashed his final barrage. destroying the pods before they could land. The silence that followed the battle was deafening. Jack Carter's heart was still racing as he hovered in space, keeping a close eye on the damaged Valkyrie ship. The Zargath pirates had retreated, their boarding pods destroyed, and their warship severely damaged. But it wasn't over. The Valkyrie ship was barely holding together. The systems were unstable, and the crew was exhausted. Jack's fingers tightened on the controls of his Falcon 9 fighter. He had fought alongside the Valkyrie, but he knew they couldn't keep up this fight for much longer. There was still a long way to go before they could safely escape the star's gravity well, and the Valkyrie weren't sure they could rely on their own ship for much longer. Inside the Valkyrie ship, Commander Rylus had gathered his remaining soldiers and engineers. The pirate attack had taken a toll on them, but Rylus wasn't about to give up. He stood tall, eyes scanning the damage to the ship. His pride, the pride of his people, had been shattered when they had been forced to ask for help. Now, a human had saved them, and his unwavering courage was slowly earning the respect of the crew. The decision. Rylus turned to one of his senior officers, Lieutenant Shara, who was overseeing repairs. How long until the ship can fly again? Shara wiped sweat from her brow and looked at the status readouts. We can get the engines running within an hour, but the shields are still down, and the life support is at risk. Rylus sighed, clearly frustrated. We need to leave before the pirates decide to regroup. The ship won't last another round. His eyes flicked to the communication console. There was a message from Jack, urging them to prepare for a final push. The human was still out there, fighting to buy them time. He hadn't given up on them. Rylus turned to his crew. Prepare to make the jump to warp. The engines may be damaged, but we have one chance. Jack will keep the Zargath distracted while we escape. The humans gamble. Outside, Jack watched the Zargath warship from his cockpit. The pirates had been temporarily defeated, but he knew they'd be back. The human side of him wanted to pull back, to find safety, but the Valkyrie were still in danger. They weren't ready to move, and the pirates would use that to their advantage. This isn't over, Jack muttered to himself. I need to buy them more time. His fighter moved quickly through space as he targeted the Zargath warship, which was slowly drifting after the damage it had sustained. Jack was ready for one final stand. He armed his weapons and took aim at the enemy ship's vulnerable engines. The Zargath warship started moving again, but this time, it was slower, damaged, and struggling to keep up. Jack's heart pounded as he fired at their weak spots, causing another explosion on their ship. But they weren't retreating yet. They had more ships, more soldiers. Jack knew the fight wouldn't be easy, and if he wasn't careful, he could be overwhelmed. But he couldn't let up. He couldn't let the Valkyrie fall. Not now. Jack pushed his fighter to the limit, zooming around the pirates as their fire rained down on him. The Zargath warship tried to lock onto him, but he was too quick. His reflexes and training kicked in as he dodged their shots, expertly weaving through their barrage while launching his own. The escape. Back inside the Valkyrie ship, Rylus and his crew worked frantically. The engines hummed to life, the power slowly coming back online. Shara was almost finished with the repairs, and the shields were now at 20% capacity. It was barely enough, but it would have to do. Engines are running at 70%, Shara called. We're ready to jump. Rylus turned to the navigation officer. Set course for the Valkyrie home system. Full speed. The ship's massive engines roared to life, and the Valkyrie ship began to move again, slowly but steadily. The crew let out a collective breath of relief. They were still alive. Jack saw the ship's movement on his radar. The Valkyrie were making their escape. He had bought them just enough time, but the pirates wouldn't give up so easily. Jack pulled away, trying to lead the Zargath warship away from the escaping Valkyrie ship. His fighter was the last line of defense. As he zoomed past the pirate ship, Jack saw the Valkyrie ship warp into the distance, leaving the pirate fleet behind. His job was done. The stars streaked past Jack's fighter as he made his way back toward the Valkyrie ship. The battle with the Zargoth pirates was over. For now. But Jack could feel the weight of what was coming. The Valkyrie were wounded, both physically and emotionally. Their ship was damaged, and their pride had taken a heavy blow. But they were alive, thanks to Jack's quick thinking and bravery. He glanced at the readouts on his console. The Valkyrie ship had made the jump to warp speed, but there was still a long way to go before they reached safety. The pirates might have retreated, but they were far from gone. They would regroup, and when they did, they would come after the Valkyrie again. Jack's fighter flew steadily, following the damaged Valkyrie ship. He had done his part, kept the pirates at bay long enough for them to escape. But deep down, Jack knew the fight wasn't over. Back on the Valkyrie ship. Inside the Valkyrie ship, Commander Rylus walked through the halls, his steps heavy. The battle had been brutal, and the crew was exhausted. The pirates had hit them hard, and the damage to the ship was far worse than expected. But they had survived, and Rylus had to admit that it was because of the human pilot. "You did good," Rylus said, his voice low, addressing one of his officers who had just finished repairing a critical console. The officer looked at him, nodding. "It wasn't enough to save the ship. We need more than just repairs. We need to rebuild, physically and mentally." Rylus understood. The Valkyrie warriors had always been strong, proud, and independent, but now they were faced with a harsh truth. They couldn't survive alone anymore. They had to trust others, and that meant trusting humans. "We'll make it through," Rylus said, looking out the viewport at the distant stars. "But we need more than just one human to help us. We need to learn to work together." The human who saved them. Meanwhile, Jack was still flying just outside the Valkyrie ship, keeping an eye on their progress. He felt the weight of what had happened. The Valkyrie were no longer just a race of proud warriors. They were now allies. The bond between them had been forged in the fires of battle, and Jack had done what he needed to keep them alive. But he also knew it wasn't enough. The pirates would be back, and this time, the Valkyrie would need to be ready. Jack didn't expect to be celebrated. He had done his job, and that was it. But as the Valkyrie ship drifted through space, heading for the home system, Jack knew something important had changed. He had gained their respect. He had earned their trust. The unexpected alliance. Hours passed as the Valkyrie ship continued its journey through the cold expanse of space. Rylus approached Jack's fighter through the communication channel. "You did more than just help, human. You saved us. I owe you my life." Rylus's voice came through clear. Jack's response was simple. "You're welcome." He wasn't in it for the thanks. The truth was, he'd done it because it was the right thing to do, and because he knew that humanity couldn't stand by and let others suffer. But as Rylus spoke again, his tone softer, Jack could hear the gratitude in his voice. "We were wrong to doubt you, and now we have a debt to repay. If you ever need us, you have allies in the Valkyrie." Jack smiled at the unexpected offer. "I'll hold you to that, Commander." As the communication ended, Jack thought about the future. The Valkyrie would be a valuable ally in the war against the Zargoth. And now, they weren't just a distant race he had saved. They were a people he had fought beside. The world seemed to shift around him. Humanity had always been outsiders, but today, that had changed. The journey back to the Valkyrie home system was quiet, but the silence was heavy with anticipation. The crew was exhausted, but there was a sense of pride in the air. Jack Carter had saved their lives, but more than that, he had earned their respect. Commander Rylus walked the ship's halls, his steps slow as he pondered the future. The Zargoth pirates had been beaten back, but the threat wasn't over. As Rylus passed the crew quarters, he stopped to look out at the stars through the large viewports. The ship had been damaged in the battle, but they had made it through. The Valkyrie were survivors, but the fight had shown them something they hadn't fully realized until now. They weren't invincible. They needed to adapt. They needed allies. A new strategy. Rylus turned and made his way to the command center. The officers were already gathered, their expressions serious as they went over the ship's status. Shara, the lead engineer, stood near the control panel, tapping through various systems and checking the repairs. Her face was tired but focused. "Commander," she said without turning, her voice low. "We're on track to reach the home system in 2 days, but we're not going to be ready for another fight. We need to make some hard decisions if we want to survive." Rylus nodded, his jaw set. He knew the stakes. The Zargath pirates weren't finished. They would likely regroup and come after the Valkyrie again. And next time, they wouldn't be so lucky. "Agreed," Rylus replied. "We need to start thinking like a team, not just among ourselves but with other races. We have to form alliances, and there's no better time than now. The human has shown us that." One of the officers, a young soldier named Kaller, spoke up. "Are we really going to rely on the human, Commander?" Rylus turned sharply. His eyes were cold, but his voice remained calm. "You saw what happened out there, Kaller. He saved us. If we're going to survive this war, we need humans on our side. There's no room for pride now, only unity." A change in perspective. Meanwhile, Jack was standing by his Falcon 9 fighter, looking at the stars through the small window in the cockpit. The battle was over, but it felt like the calm before a storm. The Zargath were coming back, and he knew it. He had given the Valkyrie a chance to escape, but their real survival depended on more than just one battle. "Commander Carter," came Rylus's voice over the comms. "We've made a decision. The Valkyrie are ready to offer you an alliance. We need your help to survive this war." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He'd never expected this kind of offer. He had helped the Valkyrie, but now they were offering something in return. "I'm listening," Jack replied, his tone steady. Rylus's voice came through again, this time with a hint of gratitude. "We know the Zargath won't stop. They'll keep coming. But together, we can build a force strong enough to defend both our people. We'll help you fight against the Zargath. Will you stand with us?" Jack stood still for a moment, thinking. The Valkyrie had proven themselves to be fierce warriors, but they were also proud and isolated. To have them offer an alliance now, after everything, was something Jack never would have expected. The Valkyrie weren't just asking for help, they were offering it. They had finally seen humanity as equals. "You've got my help," Jack said finally. "Let's get this done." Preparing for war. Back in the command center, the mood had shifted. The Valkyrie crew no longer saw Jack as an outsider. He had proven himself in battle, and now he was one of them. An ally. The Valkyrie fleet was still battered, but with Jack's help, they could rebuild. They would need to train, strategize, and work together to defeat the Zargath. Rylus looked at the gathered officers. "This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about protecting everything we stand for. We are not alone. We have allies, and we will fight for them. This is the beginning of a new chapter, for the Valkyrie and for humanity." The Valkyrie home system was still a few days away, but the tension aboard the ship had lifted. Jack Carter felt it, too. The uneasy quiet that came after a battle, when everyone knew they had survived, but the war was far from over. The Zargath pirates had been driven back, but Jack could feel the weight of what lay ahead. They weren't done yet. In the command center, Commander Rylus stood in front of the large viewport, staring out at the stars. His thoughts were heavy, his mind racing with the reality of the fight ahead. The Valkyrie fleet had taken heavy damage, and the Zargath pirates would not stop until they had conquered or destroyed everything in their path. But now, for the first time, Rylus saw something that had been missing for so long: hope. They weren't alone anymore. They had allies. The alliance takes shape. The meeting was underway. The Valkyrie leaders had gathered in the command center, and Jack stood at the center, listening closely. The offer of an alliance with humanity had been made, and it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding. The Valkyrie knew they couldn't fight alone. They had seen how quickly their pride had almost led to their destruction. Now they had a chance to fight back, with the help of humanity and other potential allies. "This is just the beginning," Rylus said, his voice firm, but not without a sense of determination. "The Zargith think they can conquer us, but they are wrong. Together, we are stronger than ever. This alliance will be our strength. We will fight, and we will win." The Varkari officers nodded, their faces serious but resolute. They had seen the human spirit firsthand through Jack. They had witnessed how a single human could change the course of a battle, and now they understood. Together, they had a fighting chance. A new mission. The days passed quickly, and the Varkari ship slowly limped toward the home system. Repairs were underway, but it was clear that it would take time before they were fully ready. Jack spent most of his time in the hangar, checking over his fighter, preparing for the next battle. The Varkari engineers were doing their best, but there were still too many unknowns. The Zargith were known for their cunning and their ability to strike quickly and without mercy. Jack knew this was just the calm before the storm. He had already been in enough battles to know that the Zargith would come again, and this time they would bring everything they had. It would be a fight unlike any other. But the Varkari were ready now, and they had allies, humans. They had learned that strength wasn't just in battle, but in the connections they formed. The bond between the Varkari and humans had become stronger than anyone could have anticipated, and it was giving the crew something they had never truly had before: hope. A moment of reflection. As Jack stood on the balcony, looking out at the stars, he reflected on everything that had happened. He had started this journey as a solitary soldier, willing to risk everything for the chance to make a difference. But now he was part of something much bigger than himself. The Varkari were no longer distant, dangerous enemies. They were allies, comrades in arms. Together, they had achieved the impossible. And yet, Jack knew there was still so much to be done. The Zargith pirates would not give up easily, and the Varkari home system was far from safe. The war was far from over, but Jack felt something in the air, a new sense of unity, a future together. The final preparations were being made for their arrival at the Varkari home system. The Varkari fleet was ready to regroup and rebuild. They had suffered losses, but they had gained something far more valuable: an ally in humanity. As the Varkari ship drifted closer to its home system, Rylus stood next to Jack, both looking out at the stars. "We've been through a lot," Rylus said quietly, "but this is just the beginning. Together, we will rebuild, and together, we will fight back." Jack nodded, his eyes focused on the endless expanse of space. Together, we will win. As the Varkari home system came into view, Jack felt a sense of pride. The Varkari were no longer fighting alone, and neither were the humans. They were part of something bigger than any single individual. An alliance. A new future was just beginning.